This is a little learning experience scenario that we put together. Um, in this scenario, which is based on a real situation, I'm going to play the inspector, the VSP inspector. Dimitri is going to play the role of the person in charge. And typically that could be the sanitation officer, it could be the FNB or the hotel director. But in this situation, Dimitri is the person in charge. Maria is our reporter, and she's going to try and create the atmosphere, what's going on as Dimitru and I conduct our inspection. So we hope you enjoy it. We have some what ifs, things that to consider during an inspection. We hope that that brings out some of the things that are unspoken between Dimitru and I. So listen in, and we'll get your feedback at the end. We hope you like it. So here we go.
This is Maria Florio, your cruise ship public health reporter. On board today, shadowing Captain Thomas Hill, a retired public health service officer, and Officer Dimitri Zamfir, the vessel's public health officer, as they conduct an operational inspection of the main galley. We are presently in the cold pantry with the sous chef responsible for this area, and we are about to enter the walk-in refrigerator. Let's listen in as they conduct their inspection in accordance with the 2018 Vessel Sanitation Program Operations Manual.
Okay, Chef, Mr. Zamfir, let's check the walk-in refrigerator next. The door handle and gasket look good, but I see the thermometer outside the door here is reading 48 degrees Fahrenheit. We'll check some food temperatures inside.
But what if you see a refrigerator reading above 41 degrees Fahrenheit? It's not unusual to see the ambient air temperature rise in a refrigerator when food workers are in and out during peak food operations. But the temperature should not be in the danger zone routinely. Checking temperatures every 4 hours is a good practice to ensure refrigerators are operating properly. Let's get back to the inspection.
Captain Hill, as you can see, the crew is busy preparing for lunch and they are going in and out. So the ambient temperature is rising slightly. You should know that it is our policy to cool potentially hazardous food in the blast chiller prior to store them in the walk-in. And the crew monitor and check the food temperature at least every 4 hours.
However, what if potentially hazardous foods are being cooled in a walk-in refrigerator? Two-stage cooling still applies. Cooled, potentially hazardous foods still need to be logged. Where you place the pans, how you space the pans, not covering or stacking pans factors in. Potentially hazardous foods may need to be stirred to help cooling. Using a blast chiller is the best practice for cooling potentially hazardous foods. Now let's get back to the inspection. Yes, the crew in the cold pantry are quite busy. I count 5 food workers preparing a variety of cold foods: tuna salad, pasta, slicing lunch meats on the slicer, and chopping vegetables in the buffalo slicer. I also see they're removing their gloves and washing their hands before going into the walk-in refrigerator. That's a really good practice. Let's step into the walk-in with the inspection team. However, what if food workers were wearing their gloves into the walk-in, keeping them on for their next task? Remember, each time you change tasks, you must wash your hands and re-glove if working with ready-to-eat foods to avoid cross-contamination. Let's get back to the inspection.
Okay, Mr. Zamfir, explain to me how you have organized foods in this walk-in.
Let me jump in here and explain the layout. We're in a large L-shaped walk-in refrigerator. It's very well lit, lots of stainless steel, clean and orderly, ready for inspection. But what if the walk-in was dimly lit and shelves were dusty, food residue or soil were present on the shelves? What if cardboard was used to line shelves? Dimly lit, soiled, and disorderly walk-in refrigerators and cardboard-lined shelves are indicative of poor food safety. But let's get back to the inspection.
Captain Hill, in this area on the right, we have the cooked veggies and on the top shelf and raw veggies on the lower shelf to avoid cross-contamination. On the left, similarly, we have ready-to-eat foods on the top shelf and then cooked foods on the lower shelves. We have raw meats arranged by cooking temperature. Right now, we have some raw ground beef, above some turkey that they are thawing.
What if raw and cooked veggies were intermixed on different shelves with raw and ready-to-eat or cooked foods? What if raw poultry is stored above raw ground beef? To prevent cross-contamination, it is important to physically separate raw from ready-to-eat foods, cooked meats, and vegetables. Foods need to be shelved based on cook temperatures, lowest temperature on top, highest temperature on bottom. Now let's get back to the inspection.
Mr. Zamfir, I see everything is covered with a stainless steel cover or plastic wrap. So no cooling in here?
That's correct, Captain Hill. If we did cool in here, we would do it on the top shelves only and leave them uncovered to cool more quickly. We are very careful to avoid the cross-contamination.
Mr. Zamfir, why are these 6-inch pans stacked here? Stacking pans is a poor cooling practice. Stacking really interferes with the cooling process. But you tell me you pre-cool before placing potentially hazardous foods in this walk-in.
What if you are short on space and need to cover and stack pans of food? Stacking and not spacing between pans are poor cooling practices. You must cool potentially hazardous foods before stacking. Bells go off in inspectors' heads when they see poor spacing and stacking or refrigerators that are overfilled, interfering with cold air flow. Let's get back to the inspection.
Yes, that's correct, Captain Hill. We pre-cool potentially hazardous food in the blast chiller before storing in this walk-in. And we never fill pans more than 4 inches depth to facilitate cooling quickly. We know improper cooling is the root cause for many foodborne illness outbreaks.
And what if an inspector turns to you and asks you to name 2 risk factors that contribute to foodborne illness? There are 5. Can you name them? Do you have a pocket guide to help you remember? Questions to consider, but let's get back to the inspection.
Okay, Mr. Zamfir, I see you have your blast chiller cooling log right there in your hands. Let's check a few of these pans to see if they're in the log and take a few temperatures. Can you have a crew member show me how they check food temps?
Certainly, Captain Hill. Here is the cooked sliced roast beef in the log and the chicken salad. You can see the 2 hours and the 4-hour temperature enter here and below 70 and 41 degrees Fahrenheit as required.
What if you're asked by an inspector to explain the cooling log and show him or her where the food is being stored and properly date marked? But let's get back to the inspection. A crew member is comparing her temperature of the chicken salad with Captain Hill's temperature. She sanitized her STEM thermometer with an alcohol pad before inserting it in the food. Very professional. It's obvious she knows what she is doing, but what if she didn't have alcohol pads with her? What if she didn't sanitize her thermometer or didn't sanitize between taking more than 1 temperature of other foods? Should she cross-contaminate? Inspectors are observing to see if you know how to use a thermometer. Let's get back to the inspection.
Well, Mr. Zamfir, internal food temperatures in here are all good, below 41 degrees Fahrenheit. The cooling log looks great, but tell me what happens when you do not achieve 70 degrees Fahrenheit within 2 hours? What's your procedure?
Captain Hill, once the potentially...
What if, thank you, Officer Zamfir, you stepped in too quickly. What if
Sorry.
some of the potentially hazardous foods in the walk-in are above 41 degrees Fahrenheit? What would that suggest or bring into question? Improper cooling, the reefer unit going down, defrost cycle? What are the consequences of time temperature abuse? And now back to you, Mr. Zamfir.
Once the potential hazardous food are cool about 150 degrees Fahrenheit, we'll leave it to rest at the room temperature. We place it we place it in the blast chiller. If we don't take it to the 70 degrees Fahrenheit within 2 hours, we will break it down to smaller pieces or smaller containers, slice it or whatever the case might be to cool it quickly. Then we reheat it to 165 degrees Fahrenheit and then start the cooling process again. Of course, we note this in our cooling log, but over the time, I think we have it down to a science.
And what if things go wrong when cooling? Remember to note that what went wrong and corrective action taken on the log. Back to the inspection.
Mr. Zamfir, I see all the ready-to-eat potentially hazardous foods have a label on them. Some have a 5-day discard date and some have a use-by date. What is the difference? Tell me about your date marking procedures.
Certainly, Captain Hill. We date mark all ready-to-eat potentially hazardous food prepared on the ship. For those prepared on the ship, we date mark them with 5 days instead of 7 days as required by the vessel sanitation operation program. And as you know, we date mark to control for Listeria bacteria because it grows below 41 degrees Fahrenheit, and we want to discard potential hazardous food before Listeria. If it's present, it can grow to a point it could cause foodborne illness. And the day it prepared, it counts for us as a day 1. For food not prepared on the ship, manufactured in an approved food manufacturing plant, like potato salad, cartons of pasteurized dairy products, we go by manufacture, use by date. But then this is important to avoid confusion. Once we remove the food from the original container and we place in another container, we can't track the manufacturer use by date. So we date mark it and discard it within 5 days.
What if the inspector turns to you and asks you to name a few of the big 6 microorganisms that cause foodborne illnesses in the US? Can you name some of them and the foods they're associated with? Do you have a pocket guide to help you recall them? Now let's get back to the inspection.
So, Mr. Zamfir, how do you monitor your date marking program?
Well, Captain Hill, we have standard operating procedure and we check dates daily. Also, we have a self-inspection program, and once a week, we have a team much more like we have with us today that use a checklist and conduct a weekly inspection. Self-inspection is a big part of our public health program.
But what if the inspector asks you about demonstration of knowledge, performance of duties, or active managerial control? These are topics that show him/her that you have or do not have a positive food safety culture and are in compliance with the VSP operations manual requirements. A self-inspection program using a written checklist is a good practice to help ensure active managerial control and to stay in compliance with the VSP operations manual. Now let's get back to the inspection.
Mr. Zamfir, looks like we have one light here in the back that is out. My light meter shows only 8-foot candles, and you should have a minimum of 10-foot candles to facilitate enough light to clean properly.
But what if the inspector observes a violation? How should you respond? If you can, correct both critical and non-critical violations immediately. Correct on site. Many times, a non-critical violation that is corrected on site will result in no points deducted. Now let's get back to the inspection.
Yes, sir. I have an engineer here with us, and he will replace the light immediately.
Very good. Corrected on site, COS. It looks like everything is squared away in here. So let's move on.
That was a fascinating trip into the walk-in. They covered so much in there. Safe food temperatures, two-stage cooling, cooling practices, preventing cross-contamination, date marking, self-inspection, and even lighting. It's obvious the crew is well trained and practices good public health.